Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Welcome to Cineversary, a podcast that celebrates a milestone anniversary of a masterful work of cinema. Every month, we extend happy birthday wishes to a different film currently observing a joyous jubilee. That's anything from a 20th all the way up to a 100th anniversary. This, as ever, is your devoted host, Eric Martin, creator of the Cineverse blog and moderator of the weekly Cineverse film discussion group. Hey, if this is a new stop on your route, we will make sure the ride's a good one. Regulars, your seats are already saved. What is the greatest romance film ever made? Many would point to Gone with the Wind, or Titanic, maybe Before Sunrise, or In the Mood for Love, and of course, there's Casablanca. But the film often dubbed the British Casablanca could easily claim this crown. It's a movie helmed by a man who would later be known for lavish, colorful widescreen epics, but many point to an early monochrome work on a smaller, more intimate scale as one of his finest achievements. This month, we honor the 80th anniversary of Brief Encounter, directed by David Lean and written by Noel Coward, which was originally released on November 19, 1945. In this installment, I'll be joined by David Thomson, the distinguished film critic, historian, and author of Sleeping with Strangers, How the Movies Shaped Desire. David and I will climb aboard this romance express and discuss why Brief Encounter still matters, its impact on cinema, relevant themes, and much, much more. But first, exactly how did everything align 80 years ago to create a movie that still speaks so powerfully to audiences today? Well, let's unpack the who, what, where, when, and why, shall we? Brief Encounter is a British romantic tragedy adapted from Noel Coward's 1936 one-act play, Still Life. The film stars Celia Johnson and Trevor Howard, with a supporting cast that includes Stanley Holloway and Joyce Carey. Set in pre-war England, it follows two married strangers whose chance meeting at a railway station evolves into a restrained but deeply felt emotional affair, quietly unsettling their orderly lives. The project emerged after the success of the film In Which We Serve from 1942, which prompted David Lean and producer Anthony Havelock Allen to form a company called Cineguild, giving them greater creative and financial control. Although Lean initially hoped to make a historical epic about Mary, Queen of Scots, Coward persuaded him instead to adapt his Still Life, a rare serious work from a playwright best known for comedies. However, this play ran just 30 minutes, which meant it needed expansion for the screen. Lean was dissatisfied with Coward's first draft, finding it dramatically thin, so his solution was to restructure the story as a flashback, opening with an apparently trivial cafe scene that gradually reveals itself as a final, painful goodbye. Coward quickly revised the script, although later accounts differed over how much writing was actually done by Coward versus Lean versus Havelock Allen and versus Ronald Neame, who ultimately received screenplay credit. Celia Johnson was Lean's immediate choice for the role of Laura Jessen. Casting the male lead, however, proved more difficult until Lean noticed Trevor Howard in a small role in the 1945 picture The Way to the Stars. But Howard nearly missed this part altogether after ignoring the script offer for weeks. For the film's score, Coward selected his favorite piece of music, Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto. Production began in January 1945 and wrapped that May, briefly pausing to mark the surrender of Germany near the close of World War II. Although the story was meant to unfold in London, wartime security concerns forced filming to Carnforth Station, whose size and inland location made it a practical substitute. Premiering in London that November, Brief Encounter was warmly received by critics and earned modest box office returns. It went on to garner Academy Award nominations for Best Director, Best Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay, winning the Grand Prix at the 1946 Cannes Film Festival, and securing major critics' honors, especially for Johnson. Nowadays, the film is widely regarded as a landmark of romantic cinema. In 1999, the British Film Institute placed Brief Encounter second on its list of the greatest British films ever made. Nearly 2 decades later, a 2017 Time Out survey of 150 actors, directors, writers, producers, and critics ranked Brief Encounter 12th among Britain's all-time best. Take a trip to Rotten Tomatoes and you'll see that it currently holds a 91% approval rating with an average critical score of 8.6 out of 10, as well as a 91% popcorn meter audience rating. Meanwhile, at Metacritic, it earns a Metascore of 92 out of 100. Okay, the train's about to leave the station, so let's climb aboard the Brief Encounter original trailer.
I'm a happily married woman. Or rather, I was until a few weeks ago. This is my whole world. And it's enough. Or rather, it was until a few weeks ago.
Can I help you?
Oh, no, please, it's only something in my eye.
Try pulling your eyelid down as far as it'll go.
And then blowing your nose. Please let me look. I happen to be a doctor.
Oh, it's very kind of you.
Oh, turn around the light, please.
That's how it all began. Just through me getting a little piece of grit in my eye.
Are you going to pictures this afternoon?
Yes.
How extraordinary, so am I.
I thought you had to be all day at the hospital.
Well, between ourselves, I killed 2 patients by accident this morning, and the matron is very displeased with me. I simply daren't go back.
What's she like, your wife?
Madeline? Small, dark, rather delicate.
How funny. I just thought she would have been fair.
And your husband, what's he like?
Medium height, brown hair, kindly, unemotional, and not delicate at all. We're neither of us free to love each other. There's too much in the way. There's still time. If we control ourselves and behave like sensible human beings, there's still time. I'm an ordinary woman. I didn't think such violent things could happen to ordinary people.
Give us a kiss.
I'll do no such thing. The lady might see us.
Come on, a quick one across the bar.
Albert, stop it.
Come on, there's a love.
Let go of me this minute.
There's a-
Albert! Now look at me banburies all over the floor.
I want you to promise me something.
What is it?
Promise me that however unhappy you are, and however much you think things over, that you'll meet me again next Thursday.
Where?
Outside the hospital at 12:30.
All right, I promise.
Nothing's worse than when someone spills the beans on a great surprise, right? And that's just as true of movies as it is of real life. So if you have yet to screen Brief Encounter, you're going to want to pause the show at this point and feast your eyes on the film for the first time so that you can avoid the spoilers you're bound to hear in the forthcoming discussion. Trust us, you don't want to suffer serious listener remorse, especially with this movie.
This can't last. This misery can't last. I must remember that and try to control myself.
Did you know that Cineversary has its own website? That's right, we actually now have a vanity URL that's easy to remember, which will take you to a freshly designed portal where you can quickly access the latest episode of your favorite podcast, as well as all of our previous installments. Now it's a lot easier to spread the good word about our show to your friends and family. You simply tell them to visit Cineversary.com. Pretty simple, right? That's Cineversary.com. We also have a custom email address just for you. Now, if you ever want to share feedback on our show or offer suggestions for future installments, or maybe you just have a question about Cineversary, send it to us at cineversarypodcast@gmail.com. Also, you can really help our show grow by spreading the good word about the Cineversary show to your peeps. Even better, please leave a positive online review and rating, which significantly helps us to get discovered by new listeners. So if you use Apple Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, some of these other services, simply search for the Cineversary page, look for a link that says something like ratings or reviews, click that link, and leave a review and or rating. While you're at it, take a moment to like us on Facebook. We also have a presence on Twitter. Our handle is @CineversaryPod, where you can easily tweet or follow us. And if you want to go an extra step in your support of our show and help keep us ad-free, please consider making a monetary donation to the Cineversary podcast by visiting tinyurl.com/donate-cineversary. We really appreciate your support. Lastly, have you checked out my Cineverse Group website? Yeah, it's easy to get confused by these similar sounding names, Cineversary, Cineverse, Tomato. But Cineverse is actually the name of my private film discussion group I founded back in 2005 that continues to meet weekly on Zoom. Every week, the Cineverse group watches, researches, and discusses a different movie, and I create a summary write-up, call it a mini essay if you will, on that movie that gets posted to the Cineverse group blog. So if you want to enjoy reading in-depth content that examines different discussion-worthy motion pictures, including classic Hollywood films, independent features, foreign masterworks, modern movies, and silent-era standouts, then visit cineversegroup.com, simply spelled CINEVERSE group.com. Fun fact, every posted article on cineversegroup.com includes a link to a recording of our group discussion of that particular film, with me leading the conversation as moderator. So if you like what I'm doing on the Cineversary podcast, you might also want to give a listen to some of our Cineverse Group recordings, which are podcasts of a different sort. Again, head over to cineversegroup.com, where you can check out some interesting text and audio content on a variety of films, not necessarily celebrating a milestone anniversary. We are delighted to welcome back David Thomson, the distinguished film critic, cinema historian, and author of more than 20 books, including the new biographical dictionary of film, How to Watch a Movie, and Sleeping with Strangers, How the Movies Shaped Desire. Now, David last joined us, it was episode 68. That's when we honored The Third Man. Before that, he appeared in episodes 53 and 41, celebrating, respectively, Casablanca and A Place in the Sun. David, it's a pleasure to reconnect and dive into another shared favorite film.
It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for asking.
Can you start things off by telling us, David, do you recall when and where you first viewed this movie, maybe its impression on you at that time, and how your opinion of the film has evolved since then?
I do. I remember my first viewing of it because I think it was so unusual a circumstance. I saw the film in a South London cinema in 1946. I don't know when, I can't remember. But what I do remember, and what is really most crucial about it, is that my mother took me to see the film. Now, on the face of it, I don't think it's a film that a 5-year-old, which is the age I was at the time, I don't think a 5-year-old is going to understand a fraction of that film. And, you could even say that what was my mother thinking about taking me to see the film?
Maybe like Alec and Laurie, you were waiting for the Donald Duck cartoons to start, right?
Well, it's a bit like that. My recollection of the experience is that I didn't really grasp the film at all. I was impressed by the look of it, I know, but more than that, I was impressed by looking from the screen to my mother, who had a real resemblance to Celia Johnson, the actor
Interesting.
in the film. And I know in that sort of deep psychic sense of the past you have, that I somehow felt there was a resemblance between my mother and the character in the film.
Not just a physical resemblance, but as far as the character?
A physical resemblance, but also there was a sort of a pensive, wistful look on my mother's face that rhymed with the look on Celia Johnson's face. And in later years, as I saw the film again and again, and as I came to understand much more fully the fact that my mother and father were separated. And I think the separation had probably occurred not long before I saw Brief Encounter. I felt that there was a sort of a mysterious meaning in my being there, and that without knowing it consciously, my mother had sort of maybe taken me to see the film because it represented some very big problem situation in her life.
Or maybe she was just melting for a young Trevor Howard.
Well, why not? Why not? Maybe she even had a young Trevor Howard that I didn't know about because, like most 5-year-olds, I think I know how my domestic situation is, but many things are going on that I don't know about.
Oh, sure.
And this has a lot to do with how the film has not just remained in my memory, but grown in it. And a time would come when I admired the film enormously, but I was confused about what the film was really trying to do. And we can talk about that at more length. But it's a film that to this day, I find every time I see it, my opinions about it shift a little bit.
Hmm.
And I'm sure this has to do with the sort of the way it touched upon my family situation and the way in which it's a study in the very English clash of reticence and impulsiveness. Again, we can get into that more, but I have taught Brief Encounter and I've written about it, and to this day, I'm not exactly sure what the film thought it was doing or what it has done, but it's a period piece. It's about a world that there are vestiges of it still in England, but much of it has not lasted and maybe shouldn't have lasted. But it is a very, very English film. And I think to this day, English audiences of a certain age are moved by it in ways they would have difficulty in explaining.
I mean, it's been celebrated for eons. It's ranked as the greatest British films ever. I think 1999, the BFI placed it number 2 behind The Third Man. Total Film ranked it 44th on its 2004 ranking of the best British movies. There was a Time Out poll in 2017 where they placed it 12th best British film ever. Where does it rank for you? Is it up there?
Oh yes, I mean, as I think I've made clear to you, it's for me. It's not a matter of how I rank it, 1, 2, 3, or whatever. It's a film embedded in my soul in a way. I mean, it represents my childhood and the difficulties of my childhood, and how those difficulties never go away. You never solve your childhood, I think.
Do you think objectively, if you had never had that 6-year-old experience with your mother in the theater and you had seen it later, let's say for the first time, do you think you would have come to a different conclusion by today?
No, I think probably the same conclusion, but it's the intensity of it that really comes from that circumstance when I was, too young to see it.
Sure.
And I was taken to the movies a great deal as a child.
That's a good thing, or we might not be sitting here right now.
Well, there we are. I was looked after by people in the family, and one of the ways they knew they could keep me quiet and occupied was take me to the movies because I loved the movies. And I think I saw a lot of movies that I was too young to see.
But maybe that gave you a leg up. Maybe you were a precocious young lad because you were exposed to maybe more adult material.
No question about it. I learned a lot about the life I did not understand from watching the movies,
Yeah.
which is a good thing, but a tricky thing too.
Right, right. What about David Lean's filmography and Noel Coward's works? Does this also place pretty high for you? Where do you kind of place this or think about Brief Encounter when you think of David Lean?
I'm not as big an admirer of later David Lean as some people are. I can see how spectacular a film Lawrence of Arabia is, but I'm never really bowled over by it, and I positively don't like Dr. Zhivago.
Well, we are really in the same boat here because I am a much bigger fan of his smaller, earlier
Me
films.
too. Me too.
Yes. Give me the Dickens adaptations, the Blithe
Yes. Yes.
Spirit, the Brief Encounter. The epics are eye candy,
Yes.
and they're extremely masterfully well done, but they just lose me a little bit.
I totally agree with you. I think that in those first years of his directing career, he found himself, but he also found and created a model for British entertainment because his two Dickens films, Oliver Twist and Great Expectations, they really are the working model for what we call masterpiece theatre, had a huge effect on British TV.
I can imagine. Yeah, Great Expectations remains my favorite Lean movie.
Yeah, and I think Lean at that time was a very, very good director,
Hmm.
and a great deal of what he did was owed to Noel Coward. Coward saw him as a young, very handsome young man. Lean was really very good looking, and you know, Coward was gay, and I don't think there was ever any relationship between them,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean there wasn't an attraction between them.
Yeah, they had a great collaboration. You have four different movies, right? You have In Which We Serve, This Happy
Yes.
Breed, Blithe Spirit, and this film. And you could make an argument that this is the movie that, maybe represents the finest of their collaborations.
I think it is, but I do think that Coward taught him a great deal about drama and melodrama and
Hmm.
character. And you know, originally, Brief Encounter was a short play done on stage.
Like a 30-minute or something like that. They had to
I
expand it,
think
right?
even less than 30 minutes,
Hmm.
and it's wonderfully opened up in the film. The use of the train station.
By the way, a little bit of trivia. That's Coward's voice bellowing out the railway station
That's
announcements.
right. That's
So,
right. Yeah. And so anyway, Coward and Lean are one of the really significant partnerships in English film.
maybe right behind the Archers. What do you think?
Oh, I think the Archers are a little better, a little more interesting. But Coward and Lean are very important. And, you know, Brief Encounter is a film that gets a lot about what was happening in England at that time in a way that few other films can compete with.
And so it sounds like you have been a Coward fan for a long time. Is this maybe the pinnacle of his achievement?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think some of the plays, Hay Fever, for instance, which I happened to see, oh, only about 5 or 6 years ago, absolutely hilarious farce, wonderfully clever. There's a quality of wit and playfulness in Coward, along with profound social observation that really underlies a great deal of English comedy that came after Coward.
Right. He's primarily known more for his comedies. So this would have been a Brief Encounter. We're talking here would have been a little bit of a deviation.
Well, he certainly was a comic writer. He was a very funny man altogether. But time and again in his work, the joke has got a seed of seriousness within it. Brief Encounter is very close to being a tragedy. It's not nearly as overtly comic a film as one would think of.
No, in fact, I would argue that the only comic element really is the subplot with the station master and the cafe owner.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So let's get into it a little deeper here. What particular ingredients, or if you will, overall recipe, maybe elevate this film to all-time classic status? Why does it still matter, and why does it deserve to be celebrated? Brief Encounter, 80 years later.
Well, I think it comes to this. Then and now, people go to the movies to dream about and to fantasize over what they might do. So, you know, we go to the movies to play with the idea of falling in love with people we will never meet, and to being brave in situations that we're never going to actually be tested in. And this is a story about an ordinary woman, middle class, even upper middle class, married, 2 children, nice house, a routine, seemingly content with the world. And all of a sudden, that contentment cracks apart, and she sees the possibility of a life, a much more dangerous life than she has been accustomed to, that has an intense appeal to her. And in that process, she realizes how suppressed or repressed she has been in her own life. She wants to do the kind of wild, reckless, dangerous things that people do in movies and that attracts the audience to go to the movies, to identify with someone doing a wild, reckless thing.
So, in other words, it's a perfect wish fulfillment vehicle for the audience.
Absolutely. And then the film retreats.
Hmm.
It takes us to the point, to the brink of Laura and Alec on the point of consummating their love. And who knows, maybe even ending the marriages they both have, which they say in both cases are reasonable, decent, kind relationships, and having not just an affair, but breaking away from the sort of safe, conventional middle class life they have. It's as if there is something in the film that says, well, we daren't go that far because after all, we're English. So we back off.
Mm-hmm.
And Alec will go off to South Africa with his wife and children to be a doctor. And he'll probably be a very good and successful doctor. And Laura will go back to her house and to Fred, who we see. And Fred, her husband, is decent, kind, gentle man, and someone who seems to sense the storm that is going on.
Yeah, I think that character acquits himself quite nicely. I'm in his corner. I empathize with him.
Yeah.
I'll ask you some questions later in terms of theorizing, like what do you think happens, or how do you think Fred knows? We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that one of the powers of the film, to what you're just saying there, is, it's Laura's POV, right? And I think that's important. We can discuss that, but we don't see Alex's spouse. We see Fred.
Yes.
And everything I see of Fred, you're right. He's a decent, upstanding man who does care. He cares, but he's also in his routines as well, and including his domestic routines with his wife.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that he's negligent or ignorant of her. I think that he trusts her a lot, and that's to his credit.
All true. And I agree with you that Fred, although he's only on screen briefly, very well done, but he's not enough for Laura.
No.
She's got a depth that needs something.
And even if he's not enough now, he might have been before, but all marriages sometimes get into ruts. You kind of take the other partner for granted. Who knows what the circumstances are? It may be that they've just kind of been there, done that, and wow, she sees this bright shiny object and she's going to follow it.
Okay, but the question that hangs over the film, which I think is really so fascinating, is should Laura have the courage to break away, or should she do the right thing and go back home and be with Fred as if nothing had ever occurred? Does she do her duty by him, by the children,
right,
and by the whole attitudes of that kind of family life?
It's a very fair question, and I would love to discuss this with you a little bit later, if you don't mind tabling that, because I'd like to get to a point where we ask some of these what-if questions, subjectively kind of come to our own. I'll ask you what you think, and we can kind of go over it a bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, the particular ingredients that stand out, that elevate this film, certainly we can point to. The two most important ingredients, the master storytellers, Lean and Coward, right? I mean, this is the movie that maybe puts Lean on the map as one of the world's foremost directors. an early career example of one of his non-epics, as we were discussing, and Coward too. He's getting a lot of recognition from this. So right from the start, it still matters to me anyway. I think you would agree, right? Because it shows how, with good writing and with deft direction, you can depict a love affair on screen without obligatory sex, for example.
We leaned on the parapet of the bridge and looked down into the water. I shivered, and Alec put his arm around me.
Cold?
No, not really.
Happy?
No, not really.
I know exactly what you're going to say. That it isn't worth it. That the furtiveness and lying outweigh the happiness we might have together. Isn't that it?
Something like that.
I want to ask you something, just to reassure myself.
What is it?
It is true for you, isn't it? This overwhelming feeling we have for each other. It's as true for you as it is for me, isn't it?
Yes, it's true.
This was solidly in the era of strong censorship, so they weren't going to show that. Therefore, the filmmakers had to be creative, right, in how they presented this relationship to viewers.
Oh, yeah. And it has a very intricate time structure. It moves back and forth in time in a very clever, very well-handled way.
Oh, structurally, the story is, you're right, so masterfully crafted. You think about, it begins the narrative at the conclusion. I mean, we've seen this before, and a lot of, like, let's say, film noirs and other types of genre movies will do this conceit. But then it presents the bulk of the story in flashback accompanied by voiceover, and then it bookends matters by repeating that earlier farewell scene at the end. And to me, that emphasizes the poignancy, the tragic nature of their, I would call it, doomed relationship.
No, I agree. And you've used the word doomed there, which I think is very interesting. And obviously, Brief Encounter is regarded as a romance, a woman's picture.
Yeah, some call it the British Casablanca. You've probably heard that, right?
Sure, but I think it's got a lot of film noir in it because Laura is a trapped figure. She's torn in different directions. And if I envisage the picture, I see Celia Johnson's face. And not the least quality and virtue in the film is the way Lean photographs her using her voiceover and the different levels of the close-up, quite intense close-ups. And that voiceover has a lot to do with the power of the film. I think that we like Laura. It's not that we desire her in a sort of obvious way, although she's very attractive. But we feel for her dilemma in a very special way. And I think Coward has genuine respect for it. She could be easily a figure of fun in a treatment of a marital farce where the wife really doesn't know what to do. She can't make up her own mind. The inability to make up her mind, the way she's torn, is really very poignant. And Celia Johnson, who certainly was known in England, but did not have a sort of big international reputation, she was nominated for the Oscar for this performance. She didn't win it. Olivia de Havilland won it. But this was a performance that brought Celia Johnson forward from British theatre to possibly an international career, from which she backed off so that she could spend more time with her own children, which is it's a version of what Laura does, of going back to the family conventions and doing her duty.
Right.
I think for Celia Johnson, this may have been a very, very testing moment in her life.
Yeah, I think it's really good casting all the way around. I mean, relative unknowns. So I think that works to the picture's credit, especially I wasn't around in 1945. But I'll say this about Johnson, and this is not a put down. She's not a all-time beauty in my eyes, but I think that works to her advantage here. They could have cast somebody like Deborah Kerr or Maura Shearer or somebody let's say, who was a more classic beauty or something like
Yeah.
that. But she's believable in this role, as you said, this middle class, upper middle class
Yeah.
housewife who, it's like she doesn't have men fawning all over her. She's obviously married with kids. It's a little bit of a different station in her life. But again, I just think it's really good casting.
I think one could say something else about that. The film has got an eye for her that knows and wants us to know that people who are a little bit short of what we call movie beauty could be fantastic.
It's true.
I have to say, Celia Johnson was no more beautiful than my mother, but it was a close call.
Ah, okay.
And when you're 5, there is only one beautiful woman in your life.
Right. Yeah. All fairness there. But of course, this remains timeless because of its romantic qualities, you could argue. You think about, of course, a no-brainer choice, I'm sure, shoot in black and white. But the pre-war setting that prevents it from maybe being firmly anchored in a particular period. We get that it's, the late 30s? I think it's supposed to be 1938.
Yeah.
But if you set it in World War II times, then it becomes very endemic to, or very firmly anchored in that particular era.
I think technically, Howard and Lean did mean it to be happening in the late 1930s. However, I can remember that in 1946, one felt the movie was about 1946. And that's worth stressing because there had been, during the war, there had been an unusual uptick in the number of broken marriages and affairs. One of the consequences of war is that men go away and other men arrive. My mother, I know, was friendly with an American flyer during the war. I don't know what happened, but a relative instability in domestic relationships and romantic relationships came with the war. And for that reason, I think a lot of people, most people, felt that Brief Encounter was actually happening in 1946.
Interesting. Okay. Obviously, we know it's not wartime. There's no mention of it. There's no soldiers coming back and forth, that kind of thing. So, again, my point is that it becomes kind of universal and timeless by not being anchored in a particular year. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And of course, the other thing too is the evocative railway station setting, which, windswept, romantic. It's always going to carry some romantic qualities about it.
Quickly, the whistle's gone.
I'm so glad I had a chance to explain. I didn't think I'd see you again.
How upset are we? Quickly.
Next Thursday.
Yes, next Thursday. Goodbye.
Thursday. Bye.
The train for Ketchworth is about to leave from platform 3.
When you think of Casablanca and the great railway scene in that one.
Yeah, and of course, all the scenes at the railway station are at night.
More shadows that way. That's for the better.
And the steam looks more magical and romantic and everything.
Right.
That was a great railway age still. It was nearing the end of the railway age, but the train station and the trains are very important in the story. And don't forget, there is a moment, and this is a moment from film noir, when Laura really thinks about throwing herself in the path of the express train.
What a great sequence. You got the canted camera angle, the expressionistic lighting.
And very early on in the film, in voiceover, she says, "This misery can't last." And it's authentic misery that she's feeling. And I feel a need to repeat that I think that misery and the feeling of not quite knowing how to handle yourself and whether to stay in a safe life or get out of it, escape from it, that's very important to this film.
Yes, I think the operative word is misery, and we're going to circle back to that a little bit later when we talk about themes. But there's a dreaminess of mood with, like we said, the lighting and some of the romantic kind of elements, the inner monologue. But you also consider that the movie is imbued with the weight of realism too, right, David? I mean, you think about the decision to shoot in a handful of identifiable British locations. Like, I'm looking up here, it says the Carnforth Railway Station in Lancashire, the Middle Fell Bridge in Cumbria. You have real suburban streets around Buckinghamshire. The decision to shoot on location at some of these sites that would have been apparent to viewers. You've got that aspect.
Yeah.
But it also feels to me plausible and honest because it depicts ordinary people in a modest, everyday setting who are caught up in extraordinary emotion, who face incredible internal and societal familial pressures to refrain from giving in to their passions.
Yes.
Real people in a real extraordinary situation. And lastly, little touches that make it feel more believable. I always think it's brilliant from Coward. The neighbor Dolly suddenly appearing, and she's just annoying as all hell. She intrudes on the lovers' last moments together, makes this frivolous conversation. That's like real life.
We've still got a few minutes.
Laura, what a lovely surprise. My dear, I've been shopping till I'm dropping. My feet are nearly falling off. My throat's parched. I thought of having tea at Spindle's, but I was terrified of losing the train. Oh, dear.
Oh, this is Dr. Harvey.
How do you do?
Oh, how do you do? Would you be a perfect day and get me a cup of tea? I really don't think I could drag my poor old bones over to the counter.
No, please.
It was cruel of fate to be against us right up to the very last minute.
Real life isn't always perfect timing, and so isn't it just like life that somebody like that would enter the scene?
Yes. No, I completely agree. And I think that for its time, it was quite an advance in that kind of realism. You don't get a great deal of naturalism in English films of that period, and the detail is very important. Lean was someone who had not been to university. He got into the film business when he was about 16 as a general assistant and someone who made the tea and that kind of thing. He was not of an upper class, and many of the people who made films in Britain were. And this is a film that has a grasp and an understanding and a respect for the way ordinary people lead their lives.
Yeah, I think you got at it. That's the heart of it to me. Absolutely. He seems like the right person for the job. Obviously, the collaboration with Coward. I mean, Coward is indispensable, but Lean seems to have that sensibility.
Yes.
And that's why, to me, again, the epics are wonderful and later in his filmography, but I almost wish he would have gone back to the well of let's go to the smaller picture.
I absolutely agree with you, yeah.
And, as far as elements that raise this film to an upper echelon, for me anyway, maybe you could argue it's overdone. Maybe it's a little over the top. Maybe it's become cliche. But the decision to orchestrate the tale with Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, this hauntingly beautiful music that serves, if you think about it, as both diegetic and non-diegetic score. What do you think about the score here?
Well, you're right, and that piano music is one of the things people associate with the film, and it looks today like lush romanticism. If you were to remake that film today, I don't think anyone would have the nerve to include the Rachmaninoff Concerto.
No, it's become rife for parody all these decades later.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think in its period, it worked beautifully. It's part of the realism of the film that these people have high-flown ideals for themselves. And that music tells us how much the idea of passion, certainly unruly passion, means to them, even though neither of the central characters, I think, has ever been remotely involved in that kind of affair. These aren't loose, adventurous people who've had many affairs. I think that if they were to make love, it probably would be the first time either of them had made love adulterously outside their marriage. That's where the film is so good at getting the complicated feelings we take to the cinema ourselves, where we compare our real life and a life that might be but never will be if we're lucky.
Yeah. Well, what I think about with the music is, you could argue, hey, it's repetitive. They keep repeating it. It's bombastic in the sense that, okay, we get it. It's hammered home. They keep going back to the well with this Rachmaninoff. But you have to remember that when it's played on the radio in her home, that's diegetic. The characters can hear it. And then you have to think about this is told from her perspective, her POV, her memories, the flashbacks. So it's probably the soundtrack to her experiences. She's thinking about this piece of music, which she has associated with Alec in the relationship. To me, that makes sense that we would hear it again and again.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely.
That's pretty much it as far as essential elements. There are others, of course. I love the subplot with the station master and the cafe owner. I think it's, to use a little British colloquialism, kind of cheeky and fun, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, you look wonderful when you're angry. Just like an avenging angel.
I'll give you avenging angel. Coming in here taking liberties.
I thought after what you said last Monday, you wouldn't object to a friendly little slap.
Nice thing if Mr. Saunders had happened to be looking through the window.
Well, if Mr. Saunders is in the habit of looking through windows, it's about time he saw something worth looking at.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Oh, it's high spirits. Don't be mad at me.
High spirits, indeed. Take your tea and be quiet.
Give us a kiss.
I'll do no such thing. The lady might see us.
Come on, a quick one across the bar.
Albert, stop it.
Come on, there's a love.
Let go of me this minute.
There's a
Albert! Now look at me banburies all over the floor.
Railway stations then, and for a while after the war, were very important places. Railway travel has diminished in Britain and changed a great deal. But the refreshment bar, whatever you call it, at a railway station there was one at every train station. And I think that the treatment of it in this film is quite true to life. The actual characters are a little bit overdrawn comically, but that's okay. That's legitimate. But a train station as a location was one that everybody knew.
Yeah. I mean, it's so important to provide that comic relief and that class contrast to the emotional heaviness in Alec and Laura's story.
Yeah. I mean, heaviness is an interesting word you used there because...
By comparison or contrast.
Well, by contrast, but there's a virtue in the heaviness. I mean, these two people, I feel, certainly with Laura, and we know more about her than we know about him. But for her, this may be the height of her life. Although it's a misery, this may be the great event in her life and the one that she will die remembering. And there is a sadness in the idea that she is going to give it up, that she is going to look upon it as a mistake she didn't make, but an opportunity she didn't take, and a way of fulfilling herself and being herself that she turned her back on because she was a little too conventional to live up to it. And that's a really resonant part of the film for me, and I think probably for most English people, because that clash of reticence and impulsiveness, it's deeply embedded in the English character.
We should pivot here briefly, talk just a little bit about ways the movie might have been pioneering or, for that matter, influential. So I guess the good way to kick this section of the conversation off is just to think about movies in the wake of Brief Encounter that might have taken a cue from this film. Movies with stories and themes that perhaps echo Brief Encounter. I think of Roman Holiday. There's, of course, the 1974 television remake of this story. I've never seen it, but full disclosure, yeah, it stars Richard Burton and Sophia Loren. There is, of course, Before Sunrise, which immediately springs to mind from 1995. The Bridges of Madison County, to some extent. Certainly In the Mood for Love from 2000. Lost in Translation a few years after that. There's In the City of Sylvia. And importantly, Carol from 2015. Can you think of any others that after watching and talking about Brief Encounter, you'd say, that movie owes a tip of the cap to that?
Well, I'm not sure that I can think of others or that I even would think of those ones in connection. But I think thematically, the idea of a romance that fails, that for one reason or another, the characters back off from, that's a very, very important part in movie entertainment, because just as the movies play upon desire all the time, different kinds of desire, but it's always there. Desire is most potent if it's not realized. And I think there is an enormous amount of cinema which is about people who have a longing, an intense desire that seems within grasp, within reach, and for one reason or another, they don't follow through on it. And that's expressive, I think, of this huge thing that hangs over cinema altogether, which is to say to us, look, are you content with your life? Or do you want one of these grander flames of passion type life that the movies offer? And should you make the break? And, we're talking about an art form, an entertainment that really does coincide with the huge onset of divorce and marital breakdown generally, or changes in what we mean by a marriage. And Brief Encounter has an important place in that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly think of In the Mood for Love and Carol, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a deep well you can pull from. There's no question about it. And I know you wrote about this theme of desire in your book. So maybe in the course of the conversation we'll come up with a few other name drops. But as far as influential, so here's a bit of trivia. But when you think about it, it's quite momentous because Brief Encounter is said to have inspired Billy Wilder to make The Apartment. Especially the scene in the flat where Alec's friend Stephen returns unexpectedly.
Oh, no, my dear Alec. You have hidden depths which I never even suspected.
Look here, Stephen,
For heaven's sake, Alec. No explanations or apologies. I'm the one who should apologize for returning so inopportunely. It's quite obvious to me that you were interviewing a patient privately.
That's the pivotal scene that woke Wilder up, and he thought about how that friend character in that scenario could make for an interesting film in itself. So there you go. If nothing else, this movie is a springboard for a later classic. So interesting there. And then I'm reading here, you would know more about this, but it's produced on a relatively small budget, no big name actors, Brief Encounter. Perhaps it demonstrated to filmmakers after its release that even an unlikely low-profile project could break through and succeed, maybe encouraging others to experiment in new directions. Now, that's a broad statement. I don't have evidence to back it up, but the other point I was going to make is that looking it up, this is one of a handful of post-World War II cinematic success stories for Britain. There aren't that many, apparently, in these succeeding years, but there is Henry V, there is Blithe Spirit, there is The Seventh Veil, and all of these, with Brief Encounter, from what I've learned, helped British pictures gain financial viability in American markets especially, and also capture Oscar nominations, including Best Actress.
Yeah, I think what's very intriguing historically is that Britain was devastated and impoverished after the war.
Right.
There was a great deal of damage.
Yeah, they suffered the most among all the Allied powers.
And food rationing went on in Britain until the early 1950s.
Right.
The country was desperately hard up. And yet, those immediately post-war years is the time of a wonderful flowering in British film altogether on, as you say, modestly budgeted pictures. Britain had often made the mistake of trying to imitate Hollywood, whereas I think British film was always, and is still to this day, best advised to pursue the small subjects because they handled them very well. A great deal of what we think of as the best drama on British TV follows in that form. It's well written, it's well cast, well directed, but it's not lavish, way that a lot of American films are. And, after the war, you get not just the Olivier Shakespeare films, not just Brief Encounter and Coward and Lean. You get the Michael Powell, Emmerich Pressburger films.
Right, the Ealing comedies.
You get Robert Hamer. There's a lot of wonderful work going on in Britain in the late 40s, almost in defiance of the fact that the country could hardly afford anything.
Yeah.
And I think that the audience loved going to those British movies at that time because there was a need for British people to take some pride in what they had done, what they had come through in the war, and that could survive the very difficult post-war years. And cinema had a lot to do with that. And it still looks, in hindsight, as if the late 40s is probably the great period in the history of British filmmaking.
The golden age for
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's a great perspective. And of course, you grew up, you knew, you going to the movies, a child of the movies, you could attest firsthand to the power of that.
Yeah, I'm about to say that I was a sucker for big, lavish American films too.
Well, certainly, yeah. I know you were keen to discuss how Brief Encounter and its characters, maybe they reflect on the post-war period in which it was released, as well as its audience. This is something, in pre-discussion, setting this interview up, you were very eager to discuss. So, just in terms of putting it in the context of its time, the thought about how, for example, Laura and Alec refrained from sleeping together. Why? And what was that a statement on at this time? Do you want to broach this subject a bit?
Well, I have found that if you show the film nowadays to an American audience, which I've done, they are baffled by the fact that these two people don't have sex. They understand that in 1945-6, you couldn't show that. You certainly couldn't show it in a graphic way on screen. But still, they argue it's just not plausible. It's just not dramatically acceptable that because these two people are in love, and we believe they're in love without doubt, they don't do it. They don't realize it. They don't turn it into something physical.
Yeah, today having an affair that involves sex and which may end in divorce is not considered as serious a moral quandary or, let's just put it, irredeemable act.
But I think that you have to face the fact that in Britain, not just in Britain, but because of the instability that war had produced that I've just talked about, people were doing it much more than they might have done, say, in the 1930s. And I wonder how seriously Lean and Coward thought about having a real sexual interaction between the two and how they would deal with it and handle it. And I suspect they were afraid of doing it, of showing the people having sex. I don't mean showing the act of sex, but
suggesting it.
Absolutely clear that they had had sex.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that says a great deal about what was still an emotional reticence in Britain at the time. And that was swept away finally only in the 1960s, where the whole atmosphere of swinging London and the changes in sexual habits that affected the world really broke through it in Britain. But I feel drawn to talk about this in personal terms. My mother and father never got divorced. And I think that was in part because they were from a social level, an economic level that was afraid of divorce. They didn't think it was for them.
I think that was kind of a common feeling among a lot of Brits back then.
That's right, but things changed. In the 70s, I got divorced. I had what had been a very happy marriage, but it turned bad, and I got divorced. And the shift from how my mother handled life to the way I did, not to put a value above all on either one of us, I think it's deeply intriguing that change had occurred. And Brief Encounter is a movie that asks a lot of questions about that, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. You've already made the case that this is the time when flings would have been a thing.
Yeah.
A lot of servicemen returning home or back and forth on leave. There are a lot of affairs going on. It's not like it didn't happen. It's not like Laura and Alec, stand in as a representation of the majority of Brits. But doing a little research in this, again, no expert, but some scholars, they will theorize that Alec and Laura refrained from having sex because of their shared middle-class identity. And that was a group that saw itself as maybe the guardian of respectable behavior. Not like the working class, not like the upper class, you could argue. And so Coward wrote chiefly with that audience in mind, I'm learning.
I think that's true, but I think that 15 years after the end of the war, that attitude that sort of sense of duty was widely mocked in Britain.
Oh, right. But I'm saying in 1945, 46, when this movie is released, in terms of rationalizing why they didn't show the characters having sex.
I agree. It was still there, and it was still important.
Now, it's important to remember, you recall Laura's narration makes clear, it's not class anxiety that stops her. It's the thought of causing her husband pain and maybe violating her own ethical code, you could make a case. She's caught between longing and loyalty, right? She ultimately aligns herself with these different dutiful principles. But for someone like Laura, the thought of adultery or divorce would have probably been unpalatable and socially stigmatizing.
And of course, the question emerges out of all of this is it possible to be married with children, with a mortgage, with a house, with a nice garden, etc., and still have passion in your life?
Yeah. Well, that's the age-old question, isn't it?
That's a great question.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that every married couple deals with. I love my wife to the death, but you go through doldrums, and you've got to find ways to liven it up. That's part of your responsibility as a spouse.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, this is interesting here. It's a little subplot to our conversation about the timing and the context of this. You can make a case, David, that the filmmakers treat the story objectively. They allow us to form our own moral opinions about Laura and Alec's affair. But the counterpoint to that argument is, to me, the scene involving Stephen, that friend. Stephen spots that scarf, remember, and he clearly shames Alec.
Yes.
Now, interestingly, this is one of Laura's flashbacks, right? She was not present, however, in that scene.
That's right.
And also, we don't see Alec later telling Laura of the conversation between the two men.
No.
So how do you reconcile this? Here, this is critic Norman Holland. I'm going to quote him in his interpretation of why Lean and Howard include the Stephen scene in Laura's memory. It's because they are, quote, deliberately encouraging us to think about what is inside Laura's mind and what is outside and the movie's objective world. So cutting is Stephen's condemnation that it reaches past the literal boundaries of what Laura can and cannot know. This is objectively wrong. I think Lean is asking us to think about what is inside and outside of our minds. How do we feel about this affair? Unquote.
I think that's correct. And I think it's also a reflection of how far, to this day, there is a strain of wildness and guilt in British attitudes to emotional life that no matter how far it's made fun of and criticized, I don't know that it will ever go away in Britain. I don't mean to say that it's the only country that has this issue. I think it's here in America too. But we are not as good as we sometimes like to think at handling our feelings. And Britain is a country where there have been many codes to contain and control and subdue and tame feelings. And, this is a film where that code seems to be on the point of breaking down. And I think it's what makes it still a relevant and quite testing film. I have found, showing it to audiences and talking about it, there's a lot of different feelings about it. People aren't certain what this film is saying and encouraging. And I don't think the film itself is certain either. I think it goes up to the brink and then backs off. And that says something very big about us, I think.
Yeah, Laura's adherence to responsibility, maybe that's what keeps her from taking her own life. Point there. She admits, she's mentally addressing Fred. What does she say?
I meant to do it, Fred. I really meant to do it. I stood there trembling right on the edge. But I couldn't. I wasn't brave enough. I should like to be able to say that it was the thought of you and the children that prevented me, but it wasn't. I had no thoughts at all. Only an overwhelming desire not to feel anything ever again.
And maybe her discontent seems tied to the moral expectations that accompany her social position. But for proof of that, you recall how she grins, perhaps enviously for that matter, when she witnesses the station master playfully slap Myrtle on the behind.
Yeah. Well, also, there is a point quite early in the film where Alex says to her, no, you wouldn't pursue a career playing the piano because you're too sane and uncomplicated. And she sort of flinches from it.
Yeah.
And that conflict between being sane and uncomplicated and breaking free and being passionate and facing danger, that's at the heart of the film.
Yeah. Interesting. I want to go back though, just kind of dovetail back to that conundrum I pointed out about the flashback. I mean, that begs the question: is Laura a reliable narrator? If she wasn't even present in that, Alec and Steven scene, can we trust that her flashbacks are accurate?
I don't feel that there's any uncertainty over that. I think that one feels she is being candid in telling the story. I think what you're talking about there is just a little trick of convenience and something that Lean saw he could do with Stephen's character.
It's just that it's so inconsistent from the consistent POV we get throughout.
Well, I don't feel her unreliability comes into play at all.
Yeah. You can contend that, since her voiceover and her memories are deeply colored by her feelings, maybe her sense of guilt, and the societal expectations that she internalizes, maybe that influences how she remembers and makes sense of the past too. So I let it go, but it's still this rewatch, I paid attention to that. Here I'm going to quote, this is Slant Magazine critic Clayton Dillard. Now, he believed that Brief Encounter transforms Laura's anxieties, quote, into those of the United Kingdom as a whole. The film, set in 1938, unfolds at a moment before the catastrophe of World War II, so that Laura's fear of her previously secure rational process correlates with the failings of nationalism on a global scale. That is, Laura's deteriorating sanity isn't merely about her splintering sense of middle-class protection, but an entirely depleted notion of cultural normalcy following Nazism's abject use of logical procedure to carry out genocide, unquote. Now, that's a pretty sweeping statement there. Do you think it holds water?
Well, I think more relevant is the fact that in the late 30s, there was a divorce that weighed very heavily in Britain. That was when King Edward VIII abdicated to marry a divorced woman, Wallis Simpson.
Yeah.
Now, that was a scandal that divided opinions in Britain in a fierce way. And I do think that it's legitimate to see that event hanging over the film.
Okay. So you don't think it was making any grander statement, even unintended, about Britain and the world at the time?
I think Coward would have flinched from that kind of attribution.
Yeah, that's a lot on any playwright's shoulders, right? I find the closing words uttered by husband Fred as the most moving lines in the entire picture.
Laura.
Yes, dear.
Whatever your dream was, it wasn't a very happy one, was it?
No.
Is there anything I can do to help?
Yes, Fred, you always help.
You've been a long way away. Thank you for coming back to me.
By the conclusion, David, do you believe Fred knows the truth about her affair, or has he suspected for a long time without tipping his hand, or is it possible that he never knew and will never know?
Well, my guess is that he knows, he feels, and it's feeling rather than knowledge, but he feels that Laura is in serious emotional distress.
When you say he knows, do you think he knows specifically she's having an affair?
No.
Okay.
I don't think he knows that at all. But I think he feels that something is failing. What is not touched upon at all, and could be argued as a failing in the film, is that we don't see them trying to put their world and their marriage back together again. Marital therapy, in other words. We don't ask the question, what does a marriage do when it thinks it's going dead? Now, there's been a huge social change since 1945 in what people do. People are much readier now to abandon a marriage and start again or simply live it in a different way. Whereas then in Britain, but I think in America too, there was much more sense of you really should play the game the conventional way, and you should try to live in a way that will keep the respect of society. Social respect means so much less now. We don't trust it. It's one of those things that has been melted away from life, and it makes life less solid, less manageable, I think, because of it. But I think it's very much why the film still plays as a romantic drama as opposed to a period piece. And I have found that audiences get stirred up by the film and will argue amongst themselves as to what should and could have happened.
Yeah, for example, how do you feel about Laura by the conclusion? Did she make the right decision in your mind, David? Should she tell Fred the whole truth? Will her feelings for Alec, will they prevent her from being truly happy in the future?
Well, let me put it this way. I think my mother should have divorced my father. I think that was unspeakably difficult for her emotionally and practically. But I think that in not divorcing my father, she denied herself the chance of a kind of happiness or fulfillment that she deserved, and which would have changed her life and the life of people around her.
Now, of course, you said you didn't suspect that your mother was having an affair, but if she were Laura in that context, you also have to think about breaking up two households and kids involved and everything else. I'm not debating your opinion by any stretch. I'm just saying it's a little different circumstance.
Sure, but I think this is the kind of argument, the kind of issue one gets into with this film.
Sure.
Which is much to its credit that, well, to say, nearly 80 years after it was made, we're caught up in these issues.
Sure. Yeah, they're relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the evergreen nature of Brief Encounter, as much as you can call it maybe dated and antiquated by the fact that, like we said, the characters don't do the deed as they certainly would in 2025, you could argue. It's a product of its times.
In general, yeah, I think they would, yeah.
Sociocultural product of its times, no question about it.
From what you've seen, do you think Laura's ever going to be happy?
1945 Laura, I think she'll find her reasons to look for happiness. She'll comfort herself in this was the right thing to do, keep the family together, everything else. But there's always going to be that suppressed part of her that is going to do the what if kind of niggling and nagging at her. Now, if it were a Laura character in modern times, you got to say sayonara to Fred.
Yeah.
Different times call for different answers. So it makes sense in the context of the time. How about you?
I think she's going to be desperate. I like Fred, but I don't want to live with him.
Doing crosswords every night at the fire.
That's right. I think the saddest thing is that Laura is probably, after a couple of years, she's going to have a very bad affair.
This whet her appetite then for later, huh?
I think so. I think that she and Alec might have made a go of it, might have managed, but I think she's going to get involved with a disastrous man.
It's quite possible. I never thought about it that way. Yeah. So let's talk briefly about themes, messages, morals to the story. What are the main takeaways for you?
I think the main takeaway is that life is difficult.
Not to put too fine a point on it, right? Exactly. Sure. Life is complicated.
But that's a very good concluding theme for a film, I think. I think that too many films try to simplify life. This is a film, and there obviously are many others, that say, no, life is complicated, life is difficult, life is messy, and the cinema ought to keep faith with that. It ought to believe in showing that.
Okay.
And offering it. And of course, many films do.
Certainly. I think about this, answer this question, and the first thing that comes to mind is, as far as a theme, just the weight of moral obligation, the weight of duty. Laura feels guilty. We can see that for sneaking around, for lying to her husband, neglecting her role as a devoted mother in her mind, and also potentially violating her marital vows. She suppresses her inner romantic needs and wants, like your mother did, attempting to adhere to societal expectations as well as maybe self-imposed ethics. Her culpability, her shame I find it always interesting when I'm watching this movie. They're externalized, the shame she feels, in several different characters who serve as witnesses. You think of the priest, the police officer, the usher at the theater, the boatman, the female friends like Dolly and Mary. So it's like there's always these reminders about, watch out, be careful. That conscience is going to bother you.
Yeah.
Also, the excitement and drawbacks of temptation, right? Brief Encounter is a morality play. It's set in a class-focused society where cheating and improprieties, they're frowned upon, and women have very few options once they've committed to marriage. That's the other part of the equation. It depicts how affairs can stir the soul. They can tickle the imagination. They can make you feel alive again. They can propel you forward, kind of like the force of a full-speed train in the train station. But at the same time, the deceitfulness, the unconsummated desire, the frustrations that follow, they can make you want to die. We even hear Laura say as much.
I do love you so very much. I love you with all my heart and soul.
I want to die. If only I could die.
If you died, you'd forget me. I want to be remembered.
They can make you want to do something like jump in front of a speeding locomotive. And as I said, the operative word that best describes the state of affair is misery.
Yep.
A word or form of it that is uttered by the characters several times in the film, misery.
I mean, what people do with misery operates at a very small personal level, but a huge political level too.
Okay.
If you accept the proposition that more people at present in this country are miserable than they have been perhaps in their lifetime, what are they going to do about it? Do they accept it? Do they go along with it? Or do they try to end misery and bring back a more cheerful, a more optimistic feeling? That's a huge question.
Yeah.
And I think what is to the great benefit of Brief Encounter is that there is that huge question at the heart of it. What are you going to do if you're miserable?
But it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because even if she does the thing that stops the misery as far as the affair, you could argue she's going to be miserable the rest of her life thinking, what if and why didn't I?
Fair point. You can make that case. And obviously a lot of people who break away regret it and they feel depression and despair because of it.
Yeah, it's a very human kind of reaction.
Absolutely. But it is equally in human nature to take that challenge sometimes.
Yeah. This misery, this conundrum, we've been talking about at length. This recent rewatch, I paid attention to this. It's kind of an inside thing going on, is it not? Like, you recall the scene in which Laura's children, they're arguing about going to the circus or the pantomime.
Yes.
And I think that's particularly revealing as a thematic representation, David, of her internal problem.
Yeah.
Because, Fred recalls he suggests taking the kids to both the circus and the pantomime on alternate days. And then Laura replies, they'd be tired and fractious. And those words, they fittingly describe her mental state, right, after alternating between the two men. So there's a little kind of wink-wink from Coward and Lean.
I agree.
The scene that cracks me up the most, it reminds us of the repercussions, actually, of unbridled desire, is when the lovers are watching the trailer for Flames of Passion. Now, that trailer itself is a hoot because it's a fake film that unashamedly apes King Kong, right?
Yeah.
But immediately after the trailer is finished, Alec and Laura are looking at an on-screen ad that reads, buy your, and then we see an illustration of a baby carriage, at Burton's. So buy your baby carriage at Burton's, as if to say, yeah, you're going to go through with those Flames of Passion. Well, be prepared for parenthood.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very, very clever as a visual kind of shtick.
I agree.
Yeah, just rounding out some other themes. Obviously, indulging in forbidden and doomed love is a theme unto itself. Some see this story as an allegory for closeted gay relationships in olden times, not just clandestine heterosexual affairs, either of which society would not have condoned, right? So you mentioned that Coward was a closeted gay man.
Yeah.
So there's that reading there if you choose to look at it. And like the two foreshadowing trains that we see in the opening that rush past in opposite directions, Alec and Laura, they're fated to lead separate futures. So doomed love. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. There's another thing that resonates now in a way that it certainly didn't at the time. Remember that Alec, this idealistic, and I think we can assume very conscientious, very good doctor, is going off to South Africa.
Yeah.
Well, in a few years' time, the idea of a smart British brain going to South Africa would have raised so many questions, you know. Immediately after the war, South Africa was an ally. It was as beloved as all the other countries that had fought in the war. But South Africa, as we now know, had a much darker story to tell.
All the baggage of apartheid and everything else. So British imperialism and so I mean that aspect maybe hasn't dated so well, but what are you going to do? It makes sense that he's going to be on the other side of the world is the point. So
yes.
You got to set it somewhere. I guess at the time it made sense.
Yeah.
But as far as, other kind of takeaways, there's the random and happenstance nature of life. Perhaps Alec and Laura, they are star-crossed lovers. Maybe they are destined to meet and ultimately part. But to me, a more rational viewer would conclude that, an unpredictable series of accidental circumstances causes them to initially meet and then run into each other. So, they do plan things later as their relationship evolves, but in the beginning, it's just luck or circumstance. As far as, one more thing as a theme or kind of something to chew on, I think of the transformative power of movies. This is something you touched on earlier, but it's a theme unto itself to me because Brief Encounter reminds us of the escapist magic that is inherent in motion pictures.
Yeah.
You think about when Laura looks at a reflection of herself projected onto the train window.
Yeah.
She's instantly transported to a series of fantasies. We can divert our minds from everyday troubles and mundane matters and live vicariously through the on-screen characters in movies, just as she does in her own mind. So it's just a reminder that movies have magic. They can pull us away from our troubles.
That's right.
All right, David, it's the 80th birthday of Brief Encounter. Birthdays are all about giving presents, I say, only it's the fans who continue to receive the gifts. So what would you say is this movie's greatest gift to viewers?
I think that it's a movie that seems old, seems a little unduly romantic and superficial, but you watch it and you want to watch it again, and it actually gets deeper and it gets more problematic. And there are so many deeper issues waiting to be fleshed out, inhabited.
Wow. Yeah, to me that sounds like a present with some wrapping paper that has dust all over it. You open it and it's a series of Russian dolls that you pull out, and it's endlessly fascinating.
Right.
So the outside package may not look that modern or appealing, but once you dig in, you find that it's quite a worthy present. Is that a fair way to say it?
That's right.
I like that.
Yeah.
To me, I think the best present here is its romantic simplicity. I am a romantic at heart. I am a sucker for a good romance. I'm not going to watch the Hallmark Channel. I have some taste, but the film to me, it boils down, David, to, temptation and attraction. It boils those elements down to its simplest essentials.
I agree.
And it does it refreshingly without the need to depict torrid sexuality, without the need for extraneous characters or subplots. And it doesn't deviate from one character's point of view. We're consistently with Laura. I like that. So it's pure, clean, and lean cinematic storytelling. Like what I did there? So that's what I like about it, the simplicity. Also, as a man, I particularly admire that it's told, as I said, from a woman's POV. A female who has a lot to lose and with whom I think any man can feel empathy for if they look closely enough. Yes, in the day, this is considered a quote-unquote woman's picture. Today, maybe you'd call it a chick flick if you're of that persuasion. But the story, the characters, the situations, they remain timeless and universal to me, and they transcend gender boundaries. So it's not a twist of the arm to get me to sit and watch this movie. I happily do it every time. All right, so do you have any current or forthcoming books or projects, any events or otherwise you'd like to let us know about?
Not immediately, no.
Okay. No plans? No books on the horizon or anything?
Oh, yeah. I've got plenty of plans, yeah.
Well, David, as always, speaking with you, so rewarding, so thought-provoking. As Laura would say, I didn't think such violent things could happen to ordinary people. I really appreciate the opportunity to rendezvous with you for yet another classic movie milestone. So thanks again for appearing on Cineversary.
Well, thank you. It was fun.
And happy holiday season to you.
And to you too.
In January, we will take a detour from melodrama to revisit a magnum opus from the master of suspense, a film that, while certainly thrilling, could be Alfred Hitchcock's strongest romance, finest work from the 1940s, and his most perfectly cast picture, and also Cary Grant's most impressive performance in a non-comedic role. Join us next month as we take another 80th anniversary journey to celebrate Notorious, originally released in 1946. Until then, this is your humble host, Eric Martin, reminding you to butter up that popcorn, live a big screen surround sound life, and yes, indeed, cherish those classic movies. They are not getting older, they are getting better and better and better and better. Thanks as ever for giving us a listen, and happy holiday season to you and yours.